Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are advised that this film contains images of people who have passed.
In the first years of the gold rush, the safest thing to drink, and one of the biggest businesses in town, was beer. Water was often polluted and very expensive.
Beer was cheaper than water because the beer was coming in on wagons coming from Southern Cross in the early days. So they were bringing more beer in than water.
Beer was safer as the brewing process killed bacteria, thus potentially saving you from perishing in one of the many typhoid epidemics that swept through the Goldfields mining towns and camps. So beer was good for your health, comparatively speaking. But publicans like Tom Doyle in Kanowna and John McManaway in Kew were far more important to their towns than just providers of drinks to hordes of thirsty men. Doyle became mayor and sponsored local events, and McManaway was elected a councillor in Kew, and the Geraldton Express credited him as having helped create the local fire brigade and described him as an ardent supporter of the community. One of the Goldfields' most remarkable publicans was Charlie Webb, a prospector turned hotel manager of the Bulletin Hotel in Yondermindra. There was an old Californian gold rush adage.
How do you make a fortune in a gold rush? Sell shovels.
In the hot and arid Goldfields, publicans like Charlie changed that to,
Mate, when in a gold rush, sell beer.
Beer was indeed big business. In 1911, Perth had 50 licensed hotels, but Kalgoorlie, with only 2/3 of the population, was home to 97 licensed watering holes and 9 breweries. Every mining town, no matter how small or isolated, had at least one pub. In their heydays, Coolgardie had 26 pubs and Kanowna had 16. Even a small town like Coolgardie had its own brewery. In such a competitive marketplace, the companies created memorable advertising campaigns, and drinking beer was promoted as a civic duty. It is our duty to advance our town, so combine duty with pleasure and drink Globe beer. They have long since disappeared, but the brewers of the Day Dawn, Nanine, Leverton, Menzies and dozens of other Goldfield breweries are preserved in the collection of the Coolgardie Museum. In these isolated communities, the hotels became the town's social centres. Marriages were held, parties hosted, public announcements made, and business deals closed in the palatial and not-so-palatial pubs across the Goldfields. The Cremorne Hotel in Coolgardie offered patrons landscaped gardens and a theatre, which provided a popular venue for touring theatrical companies and music hall performers. Perhaps most importantly, Charlie, like many other publicans, provided a de facto community welfare service to diggers down on their luck. As the newspaper reported,
Charlie is one that has never refused a 50 of flour and a case of tinned meat to a deserving battler, and is known as his words, his bond, Webb, wherever men have carried a swag, swamped it, twisted the dishes, or belted quartz.
That generosity, coupled with the transient nature of the clientele, could have dire financial consequences. At the same time, in a male-dominated society, the beer industry offered career opportunities for women, such as Clara Saunders in Coolgardie and Mary Smith in Bardock. Both successfully ran their hotels after their husbands died. Beer was regarded as such an essential part of daily life that, when the local hotels of Mount Morgan decided to raise the price of beer, it prompted the Great Beer Strike of 1903.
The publicans of the town, there was about 7 hotels in the town at the time, all got together and decided they were going to raise the price of beer. They thought everyone's going to have to pay it because you can't go anywhere else to get a drink, so captive audience, they're just going to have to pay it. A glass of beer at the time was sixpence. So they put the price up to 1 6 which is a huge increase.
The result was a boycott of the hotels. Entertainments, parades and speeches were organised by the strikers.
In the end, the publicans all came down to where all the men were collected and spoke to them all, and they said, OK, we'll put the beer back to sixpence. You can come back to the pub. So everyone rushed back into the pubs, had a wonderful time, probably spent all the money that they would have done in the 2 days anyway, and the beer remained at sixpence.
Similar beer strikes followed in Coolgardie and Fayetteville. As the newspaper editorialised,
"We can only advise the Fayettevilleans to stand firm and suffer. Every cause has to be suffered for, and sixpenny beers is a cause for which a true patriot would suffer much."
But beer was a volatile business. Miners came and went according to gold discoveries, taking the towns with them, literally. Once bustling communities could become ghost towns almost overnight. So publicans would also move on. Sometimes so did the pubs themselves. After the Bulletin, Charlie ran a pub in Yarilla before returning to prospecting. He became known as a wonderful raconteur with a keen sense of humour. Out near the Granites was an auriferous patch named Mount Remarkable, a small rush occurring there about 1902. Out to it drove a party of Coolgardie prospectors, businessmen, and the usual coterie of mining sharks. When they arrived at the scene of the find, Paddy Whelan, one of the businessmen who had gone out to secure a few options for a local syndicate, asked where the mountain was situated. "There isn't any," answered Charlie Webb.
"But it's marked Mount Remarkable on the map,"
said Paddy Whelan. "Quite so. That's why we gave it that name."
"But why Mount Remarkable?"
"Because it is so remarkable that there isn't any mountain here." Charlie was an admirer of Henry Lawson and could recite his poems by heart. Lawson visited the West in 1896, and the two men became friends. Lawson later immortalised Charlie and his pub in the poem The Bulletin Hotel.
I was drifting in the drizzle past the Cecil in the Strand, which I'm told is very tiny, and its front looks very grand. And I somehow fell a-thinking of a pub I know so well, of a palace in Australia called the Bulletin Hotel. Just a little 6-room shanty built of corrugated tin, and all around a blazing desert, land of camels, thirst and sin. And the landlord is the Spider. Western diggers know him well. Charlie Webb. Oh, there you have it, of the Bulletin Hotel.
In the next verses, Lawson describes Charlie's generosity, echoing the Coolgardie newspaper report, but accurately forecasting what would be the result.
There's the liquor and the licence and the carriage and the rent and the sea or grave twixt Charlie and the fivers he's lent. And I'm forced to think in sorrow, for I know the country well, that the end will be the bailiff in the Bulletin Hotel. But he'll pack up in a hurry and he'll seek a cooler clime if I make a rise in England and I get out there in time. For a mate of mine is Charlie, and I stayed there for a spell, and I owe more than a jingle to the Bulletin Hotel. But there's lots of graft between us, there are many miles of sea. So if you should drop on Charlie, just shake hands with him for me. Say I think the bush less lonely than the great town where I dwell, and a grander than the Cecil is the Bulletin Hotel.